the problem of the financial crisis, also the problem that we have now with the euro, is of course a problem that we are in the middle. On one side, it's Europe, it's a construction of nation-state who are coordinate more or less their politics. On the other side, the 17 countries have the euro, but the euro forces you to have a more integrated politics. And at the moment, we are in a situation where the majority of the European countries are not able to make this next step. If you have the crisis of the euro, you need a federal budget. You need a much stronger European budget to make some politics. If you don't do this, then your construction is weak. And I think this is one thing. The second thing is that we have, even there it was the president of the parliament at the end who reminded him that we are today in the conference of Cancun. And this conference of Cancun about climate change, Europe must be a key player. But Europe must be a key player is saying that a 20% reduction of CO2 is not enough. Europe should put on the table the 30% of reduction. Also this was not an item. So, and I think, but this is very important, because if we don't, if Europe is not going forward, and certainly third, we need a development fund for the poorest country against climate change. But there, the biggest debate that we have is you have the Millennium Goals, and you had 0.7% in the Millennium Goals for development for the poorest country. And now we have climate change. Now, the problem is that a lot of countries like France take the money from the Millennium Goals and put it in the climate change. But explicitly, even in Copenhagen, who was a failure, this was excluded. It was also said that the money for the poorest country for climate change might be fresh money. And there is a debate really that Europe must have. And then you have, if you have a presidency, I don't care if it's a Belgium, an Hungarian or whatever, you have to put this on the table. So I think Europe is, of course, has a consciousness, also a consciousness that economical growth must go with ecological thinking. This abstractly we got, but always when there is a hard moment, ecological thinking falls down. And this is a real problem for the future. And I want to finish to say this is a really complicated problem. Because we are in a democracy. There Orbán is right. And for the people today, not only Hungary, but the European people, the ecological argumentation is we save the future of the planet. We say if we don't do this now, in 30 years, there will be a big catastrophe. But to decide democratic things for in 30 years, in a moment of a crisis today, is for the majority of the people a problem. So we have a real democratic problem that the Greens didn't solve. The Hungarian government is not different than the Belgium. So don't make it that it is a problem of the Hungarian government. It's a problem of the nation state in their government. Whoever would be president at the moment, we would have the same problem with them.
So,
just
yes.
to be fair.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
But I guess, with any government, as Greens, as ecologically thinking people, I assume we would have to push hard that these things, that this approach, this way of seeing the present problems is reflected in the action. And I would ask Benedek to say a few words how he sees it on a few selected points that should be put on the agenda in Europe over the next half year.
Thank you. And just to continue where Dany has finished, it was very interesting to listen to you because while it was 10 years ago or 12 years ago when my first scientific publications were published, and they were about the problems of democracy facing with the ecological crisis. Is the democracy able to solve this problem or not? And in the last 10, 12 years, I haven't found the answer for that. I'm sure that I haven't seen also a better solution for ecological problems than democracy, but the problem itself exists, and it is a big problem how to convince the people to act in favor of future generations and to change their daily life because of the interest of people hundreds of years from today. So it's still very...
Say 30 is enough.
30.
You put it 100.
Yeah. Okay. Concerning the next half a year, to make shorter the time span, for the EU presidency in the next half year or for the next year, I think there are some key issues, and one of them is surely the climate negotiations. Right now also in Cancun, but there will be the next turn of the negotiations in South Africa next year. And really we don't have too much time to reach any result in the climate negotiations. So from 2012, a totally new system must be created after the Kyoto Protocol, and basically we don't see the outlines of this new regime, of this new climate regime. And then he mentioned that the EU should be or must be a key player in this process or in this issue, which is a nice thing to say, but the question is if the EU is a key player in this game. What we have seen in Copenhagen last year when China and the United States made the decisions, and the failure of the Copenhagen meeting was basically a misunderstanding or a quarrel between China and the United States, and the EU was absolutely out of the room where the negotiations were made between the US and China. So this will be really a big challenge to the EU to sit back to the table and to show up that the EU is still an important player in international negotiations and diplomacy and in the climate change or climate negotiations. And of course this needs a very direct and active and energetic presidency in this sense. The next 6 months will be crucial in this sense. So I'm sure that in Cancun there won't be any final decision. It's just some the standing points could be clarified in Cancun. But we need a very intensive negotiation process in the next 6 months to be successful in South Africa next year. And these negotiations should be led by Hungary, the country which is really not very interested in this topic. So what you felt today with the government persons, it's really true. So sometimes I feel that the government thinks that with two-thirds majority they can decide that climate change doesn't exist in Hungary, and they don't realize that it's really something so important which is over the historical wounds of the nation and our problems with the neighboring countries. And this can be seen also in the Hungarian presidency's priorities. We have linked to environmental questions, the Hungarian presidency has two priorities: the EU Danube region strategy and water management issues. Okay, these are important questions, but to be honest, the Danube strategy is interesting for 7 EU countries, and the rest is really not interested in the Danube region strategy. So choosing the Danube strategy as Hungary's priority during the presidency, it shows that it's just to survive somehow this period and not to find the real problems the EU is facing right now.
We want a Roma strategy for Europe, and we will launch a Roma strategy for Europe. Hungary will be leading that process, and we will also evaluate the new strategy for growth, the Europe 2020. That's the first evaluation is going to happen during the presidency of Hungary. So it's lots of opportunities to really look at social inclusion and a just and inclusive society. And Dany, when you talked about the role and responsibility of the Greens, I was thinking, in Hungary at least, but I think in whole Europe, the situation is that we have to uphold European social values as well. I think it's more and more increasingly we found ourselves in the situation where we're not just fighting for human rights, but we're fighting for social inclusion as well. So definitely in the Hungarian Parliament, I think the only party that credibly can speak for social inclusion is us. So it's going to be an interesting 6 months, I think, certainly, and the objectives are very ambitious. Having a European strategy for Roma inclusion, I think this is a really ambitious and welcoming objective. But I think we should kind of try and stay on the ground and look at why this came up. And I think it's fair to say that this came up because Romanian and Bulgarian Roma started to migrate into Western Europe, and a remote international human rights issue has suddenly become an internal affair for the heart of Europe. So they had to do something about that, because they realized that the problem cannot be solved without breaching human rights and basic European values. So basically, I would say, with a bit of cynicism, that the main objective of this strategy is to keep those people at home. There are lots of issues where Europe could do a lot more for the Roma. Right, and it's mainly around funding. You know, how you fund programs in Eastern European countries, and I think the European strategy can look at that. Right now, what we have is obviously quite a lot of money available for integration and social inclusion, but the EU has no opportunity or competency to interfere with the structure of how the governments are spending this money and their policies, forming their policies. And what I hope for is that this strategy, European strategy for Roma inclusion, will give an opportunity for us to control that, or if not control, but somehow give some guidance to national governments and influence and look at the structure of funds and encourage governments to spend it in a much more focused way. And what LMP is going to look out for is to see what Hungary says in Brussels and do in Brussels will be repeated back in the country.